Some of you will know I don't like surprises. Back once upon a time when I turned 40, I was given a surprise party, and I was not very happy about it. It was a very lovely thing with some extremely lovely people and some of my very favorite activities. But I had a lot of trouble appreciating what was happening because I did not feel ready for it. You see, I like to know what's going to happen and when and how. And among the reasons I don't like surprises is because I really like to be prepared. And it's hard to be prepared for things you don't know are going to happen, right? And when it comes to things like surprise parties and gifts, well, I'm afraid I'm not going to respond well unless I'm prepared. Apparently, I feel like I do not have the capacity to say, hey, this is great, thank you, unless I'm prepared. Yeah, don't think about that too much. It's just one of the things about me. When it comes to almost anything else in life, I'm really afraid I'm not going to say the right thing or do the right thing if I haven't had a chance to prepare. You see, I really, really dislike making mistakes, probably even more than I dislike surprises. So it's all linked together, isn't it? Being prepared makes me feel safe. It makes me feel less worried that I might disappoint someone or say or do the wrong thing. And in general, I may not be alone in this. I don't love the way that life can be so unexpected. So, you then might imagine that I really appreciate the words we hear from Jesus in the 12th chapter of Luke, because Jesus is saying, be alert, be ready, be prepared. I am on board with that. These are encouraging words to those of us who want to have our emergency kits at the ready, or even for those people who build bunkers and safe rooms, or even those who sell insurance. Because there are some very smart people who use complicated systems of algorithms and mathematics and predictive statistics to try and figure out and decide what it means to be prepared for the hail that might come and pummel the canola, or the lightning that might strike and cause a fire in an old building. And the world these days, maybe it always has, but I feel like the world right now makes us want to feel prepared for whatever might be unexpected. So what do you think? Should we be preparing for all of the chaos in the world around us? And if so, how on earth do we prepare for things like car accidents? How do we prepare for political turmoil or threats to democracy? How do we get ready for a measles outbreak or a West Nile virus outbreak or whatever that new virus is in China that I can't yet pronounce? What does it mean to be alert to suffering in Gaza or sudden changes in our own health? These are some of the same sorts of questions, different contexts, but the same kinds of questions that Jesus is addressing in this Bible passage. He talks about both good things and bad things that could surprise you, right? The possibility that if we're ready for it, the owner could turn around and serve the servers. What a great surprise. Or on the other hand, a thief could break into your house. And because we don't know the day or the time or the circumstance of any of those things, we should strive to be prepared, he says. However, the kinds of preparations that Jesus talks about are not exactly the kinds of things that we imagine might make us ready for the unexpected. Unfortunately for me, while it might seem like Jesus is supporting my desire to have all of my ducks in a row, to have all the supplies I could possibly need at the ready, to control all the variables so I am ready and not actually surprised at all. If I try and clear my assumptions, and frankly, try to put aside all of the things I just want to be true, and instead listen a little more closely to what Jesus is actually saying, I am surprised by what I read. And given my love of surprises, you can imagine how happy that makes me. It turns out that Jesus' words start to be more challenging than comforting to Julie. Maybe to some of you too. Jesus begins this discourse about preparation by saying, so one of the ways you might prepare is, give away everything you've got. What? He says, don't be afraid. What? God's got you. Let it go. And really pay attention, he says, to where you're investing what you've got. Because even if you tell yourself that what you're doing doesn't really matter, it will tell you it does matter. In fact, it will tell you what matters to you. That's where your heart is, where your energy goes, where your resources go. That's what matters to you. Well, this is exactly the worst advertising for retirement funds and pension plans. Don't stock up for the sake of stocking up. That's what I'm doing. I'm stocking up for the sake of stocking up, just in case. No, Jesus says, don't worry about that. Sort out what really matters to you. Figure out where your heart lies. Direct your treasure there. That'll be the best way for you to prepare for whatever happens. Now, knowing what you've heard about me already, you know I'm not going to recommend that you give away everything you've got. And honestly, I cannot suggest that Jesus' advice to us in 2025 in Portage la Prairie would actually be to give away everything we have. In almost every way, life is different. Decisions made today need to reflect what today's context is, right? And even in the ancient context, Jesus is surely not suggesting that the servants need to stay up awake all night so that they'll be ready when the owners return. Because they'd be no good to their employers without having some sleep. So Jesus must be thinking a little bit more symbolically. He must be thinking about what kind of preparation would allow for readiness without notice. So when there's no time to adjust because you just wake up and you have to simply respond to whatever the moment is offering. And this, it seems to me, offers some wise counsel and some challenge to our present day, regardless of the vast differences in life since biblical times. What do you think is the best preparation for the times when life goes off the rails? We cannot possibly stock up supplies for every sort of disaster, can we? If you were to ask most of us 10 years ago, 2015, what things we might have prepared for us, what supplies would have prepared us for the twists and turns that have happened over the last 10 years, pretty sure none of us would have got that right. I know that none of the ways I like to prepare would have made me feel more ready for the last 3 years of my life. But investing in a kind of, what did this translation say? Wallet that doesn't wear out. Or knowing exactly what does and does not matter to me might have helped me feel a little more ready when I started to get questions from the doctors about what kind of treatment options I was interested in pursuing. I suspect that as much as people went rushing to stock up the toilet paper in 2020, the preparation that might have been most helpful if anything was going to be helpful at all, was to understand the values that we wanted to stay committed to when the world seemed to have turned upside down. Similarly, today, when the economic and the political dynamics in place seem to be unprecedented, knowing what matters to us might be better preparation for what is around the corner, rather than making sure we're stocked up on whatever might have the next tariff placed upon it. If we know what truly matters to us, what kinds of practice will help us be ready to offer ourselves for service to that cause? I don't know. What might help us with the future task of letting things go or giving things up? Jesus talks about letting go of fear. That's tricky for us. And being alert to promise and possibility. You know, his words make me wonder whether readiness involves less looking ahead to things we cannot possibly predict that may or may not happen, and instead being attentive to what is indeed immediately in front of us. What opportunities are available right now? What glimmers of something sacred or holy might we see if we weren't paying attention to the things we are stockpiling for just in case down the road? In what surprising ways might God be showing up today, here, now? Well, you can imagine, well, maybe you can't. If you know some things about my health journey in the last little while, you might imagine that I've been able to practice over the last few years my own response to surprise. Now, let me be clear, I still don't like them. They make me nervous, they throw me off, and I don't feel confident. But it turns out that I have been given the opportunity to practice, and practice, and practice some more, dealing with surprising turns of events, and more spontaneous decision-making, and letting go of expectations of knowing what and how things will be. And this kind of practice has helped me be a little more ready, a little more open to spontaneous opportunities and invitations that come into my life, and the surprising ways that God can show up. The practice has also asked me to put aside some cynicism. I've heard it said that in our current world, cynicism often masquerades or pretends to be wisdom. I think that's true. Because we think if we're cool and reserved and distrustful of the world, we'll be more prepared for the chaos around the corner. But in fact, the tendency to expect the worst from the world tends only to deliver it most of the time and doesn't make room for any promise. There's a comedy writer named Asher Perlman who, over the last 6 months, decided to pursue a doomed and delusional task of being able to dunk a basketball with a double pump, the way he had seen an NBA player, Ja Morant, do in a particularly impressive way. Asher is not a basketball player. But he saw this guy do this and said, I could do that if he gave me 6 months. In many ways, he was not prepared for this task. He was not ready. His body was nowhere close to being prepared. He had a shoulder injury, a back that kept going out. His knees aren't that great. And in fact, after 6 months, he was really hardly any closer to being ready to complete the task. I think he made a layup. That's as far as he got. And but through the 6 months, he received all kinds of support and help from the Late Show with Stephen Colbert to try and prove that he could pull this off. Because the show was invested in, making fun of him. But so they gave him all kinds of resources. They gave him a coach. They gave him a gym membership. They introduced him to ball players with absolutely no possible way that he was going to succeed. And guess what? It was a complete and utter failure. Now, I must admit that I followed this quest with some interest over the last 6 months. Because it was clear to me at the very beginning, when you look at the guy, he had no chance of success. And mostly he was only going to look silly for thinking he had reason to try. It's the kind of quest I would never want to start, because I would know at the beginning I was doomed to fail. So why would you start something you knew you were going to fail? And cynicism, disguised as wisdom, would tell me that it would be a complete waste of my time. And yet, Asher, at the end of this 6 months, was incredibly happy and grateful for the experience the journey gave him over those 6 months. While he was completely unprepared for most of the adventure, what he was ready for was the opportunity. He was prepared to try something, and not afraid to look foolish by trying it. And pretty much, you know what else he was ready to do? He was ready to share it, because pretty much everyone else who was paying attention to it got to enjoy the journey with him. And it was, frankly, a good time to be a part of it. I can't help but wonder if it's these kinds of things that help us think more fully about what Jesus is getting at, and the kinds of things that Jesus is inviting us to think about as we consider whether and how we are prepared or ready or alert to the world around us. Are we ready to embrace opportunities in front of us? Would we be willing to do something so that others could join us on the journey? Especially if we figured out that it was connected to where our heart lies. Could we be alert to the presence of God? Not in some future time when we are ready for it. I often think, we've got to get ready. People think, they can't come to church because they're not ready for it, or they're not in good space. No. What if you came right now? Ready or not? Ironically, we might discover the paradox that not worrying about whether or not we are ready might make us more ready. Depending, of course, on what we determine matters. Depending on what values we decide to treasure. Truly, what is perhaps most predictable in this life is that we cannot know what is around the next corner for us. This world, this life, is full of the unexpected. And we will be surprised. And so we should be. And as people of faith, could we receive this as a gift? I don't know. Are we ready? Are you paying attention? So many questions, and we live into the answers. May God find us alert to what holiness may be happening around and near us and within us, even now. Amen.